30 July 1000, 943, 45, 6 newtons 1058, W Bay of Biscay. Noon haze rides an iron-grey chop. Engines throb above the cloud deck. On the surface, 3 German boats push west in company tanker submarines, U-461 and U-462, Type XFAV, with U-504, Type IXC, off their beam. Orders for the crossing are blunt steam together through the Biscay gauntlet flak crews, ready eyes up, batteries charging while daylight holds. Every minute on the surface is range bought with risk. On U-462, Oberleutnant Zur, C der Reserve, Bruno Vau, has the bridge watch straining into the glare. Sound first, then shape. A growl knifes under the wind and the reflex fires. Alarm. The horn brays. Men drop through the hatch from the bandstand. The bridge party follows feet first, helmets scraping steel. Dogs slam. Handwheels bite. In the control room, the drill snaps on like a switch. Close diesel air, declutch motors ahead. Open main vents, flood hard, bow down. Angle 10 to 12 degrees. 30 meters in roughly 30 seconds. 60 in roughly 60. That stopwatch is the only margin that matters. The margin is already shrinking. A Halifax from Noba 502 Squadron Royal Air Force is sweeping with air-to-surface radar, finding the boat before the boat can find the aircraft. A Liberator from No. 53 Squadron Royal Air Force is riding a converging vector. A Sunderland of No. 461 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force Flight Lieutenant Dudley Marrows at the controls, is loping in from a distant spill of sun, heavy with depth charges, and a crew that knows this water. Far beyond the haze line, Captain F.J. Walker has the second support group cutting in at speed destroyers and sloops drilled to box hold and finish. The U-boats may not see those masts yet. They will feel their pressure soon enough. The conning tower of U-462 drops as the bow bites. Compressed air hisses. Aft trim answers. The helmsman calls the rate. The depth gauge ticks through single digits 10, 15, 20. In training off Danzig, they chased a clean fall without porpoising 30 and 40 emergency dives in a day until hands bled. Out here, the ocean adds a new variable to the math. An attacker who begins his run the instant your vents open. In daylight, he needs only radar to find you and eyes to confirm you. If he has height, angle, and timing, he does not aim where you are. He aims where your bow will be. The Halifax commits early to deny the last 5 seconds. Bomb doors open. The stick walks tight along the track of a diving casing. Water heaves, spray lashes steel. The boat shudders. In the dim green light, gauges flutter then steady. Motors ahead, hold angle, level at 30, keep going. The sky thickens with intent. Marrows brings the Sunderland in on a long, flat run that eats the remaining distance in one breath. He reads the sound of main vents and the look of a vanishing hull timing the drop so the charges meet the boat in the shallow band. The surface lifts and tears. U-461 takes the worst of it. Oil erupts. Men thresh in kapok vests. The Liberator arrives before the sea settles. Farther out, another aircraft curls in from the sun, the next stick already sighted. Inside U-462, the dive clocks against the blasts. Near misses turn into pressure that crawls through steel. The captain holds to the procedure because there is nothing else to hold. Down to 60. Hold. Listen. The screws of surface ships begin to write their own signature on the water. That is Walker closing the noose. If the boat is forced up again, ramming and gunfire wait on the rim of the datum. The German script is precise alarm, clear seal, flood motors, angle depth. The Allied script is precise, too refined, until it compresses a submarine's survival window to less than a minute whenever an aircraft appears inside the last mile. U-504 shears away to steal its own dive. The formation that left port as a plan fractures into isolated emergencies. Each boat runs the same equation with different inputs. Distance to attacker roll-in height, sea, state, crew, fatigue, ballast response. The constant is the clock, 30 to 45 seconds. If you are still up when the bombs arrive, you lose. If you are under but too shallow, you still lose. Safety is at depth, and depth now lies behind a gate the enemy has learned to close. Depth 32 meters, then 40. The boat steadies. The sea above stays angry. Hydrophones braid a harsh track 1 engine at high revolutions, moving left to right, a deeper flying boat note farther out, a cluster of propellers rising together like a zipper. The air tastes of battery, acid and hot insulation. Orders move in clipped phrases. Trim aft 1 mark, hold 60. Listen. On the surface, the sequence is clinical. A Sunderland from No. 461 Squadron Royal Australian Air Force holds a long, flat-run hull, bright in haze, and drops a pattern that walks across a vanishing wake. White pillars rise and split. Black oil erupts. Men tumble into the slick. The flying boat climbs orbits once to fix the position and keys a contact report with time and grid. 1 tanker submarine destroyed. 2 Halifaxes from No. 502 Squadron Royal Air Force reset their angles. Routine takes over, acquire the radar return, confirm the shape through haze, roll in early to deny the last seconds, aim ahead of the bow. 1 pattern lands tight along a diving casing. Pressure slams the surface flat. Spray lashes steel. Another pattern brackets the disturbed patch where vents have wrung the sea into froth. U-462 tries to buy depth with procedure. The attackers buy proximity with instrumentation and timing. 2 scripts collide inside a minute. 50 meters. A slow plane is ordered to ease, the bow cancelled as another string thunders overhead. The boat mushes, then catches. Needles flutter, settle, climb again. Lights tremble, go steady. In the after compartment, a petty officer palms the warm motor casing and keeps his hand there as if feeling a pulse. He breathes because breathing keeps time moving. Above, a Liberator from No. 53 Squadron, Royal Air Force carves in. The bombardier sights not where the conning tower was a moment ago, but where the track will carry it corrected for sink. The stick walks the downwake. When the spray falls, there are pieces in it, raft slats torn, plating a widening stain. Survivors of U-462 will be in the water within minutes, clinging to wreckage as His Majesty's ship Kite and His Majesty's ship Wren sprint to the datum. The clock that began with alarm stops near 1216. Below U-504 rides the edge of hearing. A Doppler shift slides past starboard. The captain risks another degree of down angle to steal distance from the datum and trade noise for depth. He knows what waits if forced shallow. The second support group under Captain Frederick John Walker, ships that do not merely chase but corral. Their doctrine is a pressure system. Fix with aircraft and bearings. Pin with sonar. Pattern with charges. Hold contact until fatigue breaks a man or damage breaks a boat. Every quiet minute earned here is a minute not spent inside that lattice. The hydrophone operator calls it first multiple screws, speed increasing. Bearings shift, then resolve into a box. His Majesty's ship Woodpecker, His Majesty's ship Wild Goose, His Majesty's ship Kite, and His Majesty's ship Wren slide toward the last sighting lines, tracks already making a cage. Aircraft orbit and mark the oil with precise voice reports. Destroyers settle to approach speeds that let the sets breathe and let patterns land true. This is not hunting in the old sense. It is closing a designed space. Inside, the air grows heavier. 70 meters, then 80. Somewhere, a loose bolt rolls, kisses, steel stops. The depth gauge ticks and pauses as if thinking. The first pattern lands. Pressure punches frames. Dust jumps from cable runs and hangs in the light. The hull rings once, then again a half-tone lower. Men swallow that sound. Above decks, the box tightens. If the submarine turns right, the box rotates with it. If it dives, the charges chase the band. If it slows to hide in its own quiet, the pursuers ease back and wait out the silence. Noon slides into afternoon, and the tempo does not change. The window that once gave a U-boat 30 to 45 seconds to live after alarm now gives the hunters 30 to 45 seconds to deliver a decisive pattern after sighting. The math inverts. The arithmetic is relentless. 1543. Near 4533N, 1056. W. The closing act finds U-504. Patterns land in sequence. A final set strikes clean. The hydrophone trace ends with a short, torn sound. The box holds station until bubbles and oil confirm what the bridges already know. no survivors. The stain spreads thins, and the sea resumes its indifferent chop. The first, second, is reflex, alarm. Feet slam steel, hands find rungs, the bridge empties into the tower, and the tower into the control room. The second is steel on steel. Hatch dogs bite levers seat, a petty officer puts his shoulder into a wheel, because the wheel must not hang up when the next blast hits. Third, second, air. Diesel intakes, close exhaust shutters thump the smell of hot oil, and soot is cut off as if someone pulled a curtain across the room. Fourth, second, motive power. Clutches separate, electric motors take load, the hum thickens, the deck tilts by a hand's width. Fifth through 10th seconds belong to buoyancy. Main vents open, air hammers out of ballast tanks, and the boat learns to be heavier than the water it lies in. Negative tank is cracked to drive the bow down early, then will be balanced out before the boat porpoises. Bow planes go to dive angle, stern planes catch the fall, so the nose does not dig too hard. The man on the depth gauge calls figures that are not yet depth-only intent. Between 10 and 20 seconds, the casing disappears. The ocean closes over the conning tower rim in a sheet, and the last of the bridge watch hears the world change pitch. This is the window the bomb aimer wants. He does not aim at the tower as it went under. He aims at the line the bow must travel, corrected for sink rate, corrected for sea state, corrected for where the helmsman will level to save his speed. If he is close enough when the vents blow, the correction is small and the error bars vanish. 20 to 30 seconds and the numbers begin to mean something. 15 meters is still danger. 20 is danger. 25 is danger. 30 feels like a door that could close but does not. Training set the mark here. 30 meters in roughly 30 seconds. 60 meters in roughly 1 minute. Crews worked it off Danzig until their thighs burned and their palms were raw, chasing a clean fall that did not balloon at 20 and did not slap flat at 35. Best times lived in the 27 to 30 second band for the first mark, a result earned by repetition, not luck. The last half of the minute is about trimming into survival, motors ahead to keep way, planes eased to catch the run, negative bled out so the boat does not keep sinking when the captain needs it level. Pumps and valves chatter then quiet. The chief watches the amperage because too much draw lays heat into the batteries, and heat is noise in the water. The helmsman rides the needle as if it had weight. The goal is not elegance. The goal is to put steel at 60 meters before the next pattern arrives, and to do it without a roll, without a balloon, without the long, slow heave that tells a sonar operator above that a damaged submarine is trying to hold itself. Together, Allied instruments have taken bites out of each part of this minute. Early warning that once came from an ear and a pair of binoculars now often arrives too late to matter. Air-to-surface radar reaches through haze and rain at ranges where a lookout sees only grey. At night, the Leigh Light turns the last seconds into a flood of white and shadow. By day, radar puts a bomber on the right bearing and the human eye does the rest. The aircraft's speed collapses distance. The distance collapses time. The time collapses the dive. German counters exist, but they do not repair the math here. Running in company means more guns, but it also means more wakes. Flak mounts on the bandstand promise a bubble of denial around the bridge, but a tight high-speed approach erases that promise. Metox can squeal a warning for the older radars, but the newer sets do not announce themselves in time. The schnorkel is coming into the force, but in this summer, the boats still charge mainly on the surface when the batteries demand it, and the Bay of Biscay remains the place where those demands are paid or collected with interest. The human part keeps the count even when the numbers run against the boat. A coxswain squeezes the wheel to keep his hands from shaking, then releases it because a tight grip cannot feel a change in load. A machinist mates his palm to a motor casing as if checking a fever. The captain holds his voice level when he says, "Hold 60", then says, "Make it 70", then says, "Quiet". The crew listens to the hull sing 2 notes after the next pattern lands. The first is high and quick. The second is lower and longer. They all hear it. No one names it. Above the aircraft do not dramatize any of this. They fly the run, drop the pattern, climb and arc back into the stack. Each leg is timed to the rate of a diving submarine. Each correction is small. Each call on the radio is a bearing, and a range and a note that oil is spreading. Ships close to the datum and reshape their box until there is no seam left to run. Noon steps toward evening. The minute that used to belong to the boat now belongs to its enemies. The sea flattens where the last charges fell, then resumes its chopped rhythm as if nothing has happened. The aircraft climb wheel and drop their noses again, each turn written to the pace of a submarine trying to hide. Voices pass bearings in clear-clipped English. Oil spreads in a thin fan. Wreckage turns in the slick and shows raw edges. A kapok vest drifts by itself. The sky looks the same, but the rules beneath it have changed. His Majesty's ship Woodpecker takes the northern leg. His Majesty's ship Wild Goose slides to the west. His Majesty's ship Wren and His Majesty's ship Kite drive in from the east and south throttles, set to the approach speed that keeps their ASDIC beams steady and their own noise low. None of them rush. Captain Frederick John Walker has spent months teaching his second support group that speed is not drama, speed is geometry. Make the box, feel the contact, hold the cage. The hydrophone notes from the aircraft are enough for the first setup. The ships will do the rest. Inside U-504 the air is warmer, now the last of the surface cool bled away. The captain keeps his voice level. Hold 80, ready to go 90. The helmsman trims by a finger width and listens to the note of the hull to judge whether the boat is still falling or has taken the plane. A petty officer slides along the battery well with the ease of a man who has done it in darkness too often to count, laying a hand to each connection as if the cells could speak. The hydrophone operator leans in, eyes closed, because the next clue will be a small change in the rhythm of a propeller, not a shout in his headphones. He hears it. 2 ships matching each other. A third ghosting to one side. Space becoming shape. On the surface, the aircraft stop guessing and start measuring. The Sunderland from number 461 Squadron Royal Australian Air Force lays a smoke float to mark the best datum. The Liberator from number 53 Squadron Royal Air Force cuts a fast arc outside the destroyers and reports that the oil is growing darker. 1 Halifax from number 502 Squadron Royal Air Force makes a final pass to discourage any thought of a shallow level-off, then climbs back to altitude and orbits eyes on the water, ready to point a masthead where the next boil rises. The air and the ships are now a single instrument. The first depth charge pattern of the new phase lands across the path that the submarine must take if it wants to break out to the west. The detonation is not a single blast. It is a sequence. Each hammer of pressure leans on the frames and then is gone, replaced at once by the next. The hull answers with a tone that the crew feel in their teeth. Dust lifts, swirls, settles. Someone mutters a number and bites it off. The captain waits 2 beats and orders a slight change of course that will look like a larger change above. The helmsman makes it with a movement that is more thought than motion. His Majesty's ship Woodpecker's ASDIC operator calls a contact. Range 2,000 yards, bearing shifting left. The captain does not turn to face it. He crabs the ship across it, keeping the beam on so the trace stays firm. His Majesty's ship Wild Goose adjusts to hold the opposite edge. His Majesty's ship Wren slows 1 knot to let the pattern breathe. His Majesty's ship Kite increases 1 knot to close the seam. 4 sets make a room where there was only ocean, and the room begins to shrink. U-504 goes deeper. 90, 95, 100. The boat creaks in a way that makes the back of the neck itch. Valves chatter for a moment, and then are quiet. The chief watches the amperage again, and calls a number that is within limits, but only just. The captain weighs the next order, and chooses quiet. The crew understand. Silence is not absence. Silence is a tactic. A quiet boat turns to shadow on a sonar screen, and a shadow can slip a wall where a sound cannot. The ships answer with patience. A creeping run begins. 1 escort holds the contact with a steady beam. Another slides in from a flank with engines just above idle, laying charges by the clock rather than by the bright center of a trace, timing each drop to the speed a damaged submarine must hold if it is to keep from mushing into a fatal lease. Sink. There is no guesswork in this. It is arithmetic in salt water. The sea throws back the sums in hard pulses that climb the hulls and run along the decks. Below, the crew feels the timetable more than they know it. A man counts his breath and matches it to the slow swing of a gauge. Another marks the interval between charges with his tongue against the back of his teeth and knows that the next set is closer. A third looks at the paint line where the deck plates flex against a bulkhead and measures how far the scuff mark travels with each slam. The captain does not look at any of these things. He watches the needle and the compass card and keeps the voice steady that keeps the boat steady. The next pattern finds them half-turned. The first pair land ahead and above distant pressure that feels almost gentle. The second pair are level, and to starboard a blow that shudders through the motor mounts. The third pair are slightly aft and low, the kind that makes the stern planes chatter as if they had teeth. For a second the boat forgets its shape, and then remembers. Men ride the memory back into their limbs and check their stations with hands that do not hurry. On the surface, the box tightens by a yard on each side, and then by another. Aircraft continue to mark and count. Destroyers continue to time and drop. Afternoon pulls the light down until the shadows of the ships stretch long across the chop, but the system does not tire. The minute that decided a crash dive has become hours that decide a life. The arithmetic does not change. The cage is nearly closed. The next set comes in stepped timing, not hurried, not slow, each detonation arriving on the beat that a submerged hull cannot ignore. The first charge hammers the bow planes. The second reaches for the control room like a hand through the water. The third presses the stern down and leaves the deck at a new unwelcome angle. Gauge needles jump. A lamp winks and returns. In the motor room, a coupling complains with a dry metallic bark that is new to every ear that hears it. The chief lays his palm to the bearing housing and feels the heat that was not there an hour ago. The captain does not speak for 2 breaths. Then he chooses the words that hold the shape of the boat together. Ease planes. Hold 100. Quiet. He has 2 clocks in his head. One is the minute by which the aircraft measure their legs. The other is the longer hour by which the ships close their lattice. Neither favours him, but only the shorter can be bent by human hands. He orders a small course change, 2 points, then lets the boat live with it long enough that an ASDIC plotter above will be tempted to overcorrect. On the surface, His Majesty's ship Woodpecker and His Majesty's ship Wild Goose keep the far sides of the box, honest beams, steady traces firm. His Majesty's ship Wren takes the creep screws barely above a murmur, laying charges by clock and chart rather than by the lure of a bright centre on the scope. His Majesty's ship Kite holds the near seam and refuses to be tricked by the submarine's little drift. In the air, the Sunderland marks a fresh boil with a smoke float. The Liberator ranges wide and reports the oil stain darkening, and one Halifax stays high as a watcher, calling each sparkle of blast and each arc of spray with the practice of men who have learned to speak only in distances, bearings, and times. Below, the hydrophone operator hears the box learning the boat. Bearings that once swung fast now creep. Intervals that were ragged now regularize into a pulse. He presses the headphones tighter and tries to read the small lies a human brain tells itself when the pattern grows too perfect. Beside him, a man counts his breathing again and finds it too quick, then forces it back to the count he keeps with his tongue against his teeth. In the battery, well, acid, steam, stings, and settles. The chief looks at the meter one more time and mutters a number that is within limits, but too near the line, that if crossed, will mean heat enough to talk to the sea. The next pattern lands closer. The first pair strike high and left. The second pair are level. The last pair are a touch low and to starboard. The hull answers in 3 notes, each lower than the last, the bow frames shivering, the motor mounts taking a blow, the stern planes chattering like teeth in cold. A valve chatters and then seats. A gasket weeps and then holds. A man who has never prayed at sea does not begin, but he does put his hand on the bulkhead because the bulkhead is real. The captain chooses the risk that is left to him. He orders a shallow rise of a few meters to lift the boat out of the exact band that the last pattern found, then demands quiet immediately, to erase the signature that such a rise writes on an ASDIC screen. The helmsman rides the needle as if it had weight. The plainsman breathes with the deck. The boat finds the new level, not much, just enough that the next charges must be timed again rather than merely repeated. On the bridge of His Majesty's ship Wren, the Aztec trace fattens and then thins, the telltale of a depth change that is small but real. The captain resists the urge to hurry. The creeping attack is a study in refusing urges. He adjusts a hair, shifts the drop points by seconds, and signals His Majesty's ship kite to shave the opposite edge. The room of water in which the submarine can move is smaller now by the size of a church, and will be smaller again by the size of a room, then by the size of a corridor, and finally by the size of a coffin. U-504 takes the next set head-on. The first detonation hits like a slammed door in a narrow hallway. The second folds the air in the control room into a thickness that can be tasted. Dust leaps from cable runs and hangs there as if time has slowed. The lights hold. The hull holds. Somewhere aft a line parts with a sound like a pistol shot, and no one moves toward it because there is no time left for anything that is not on the list that keeps a submarine whole. The captain says two words, both steady. Hold depth. Above the box draws down to the last shape. His Majesty's ship Woodpecker keeps the north. His Majesty's ship Wild Goose holds the west. His Majesty's ship Kite slides across the south, and His Majesty's ship Wren brings the hammer from the east. The aircraft speak in measured phrases. Oil heavy. Debris light. Pattern good. The sea gives back the answers in pillars and boils, and the sagging hush that follows each string. Afternoon light lengthens and yellows, but the timing does not drift. The method does not tire. The final run begins without announcement. The destroyer steadies on the line that the submarine must take if it is to buy one more minute. Depth settings are chosen for where a damaged hull will sag, when the plainsman is a breath late, and the negative tank is a breath full. The drops come off the rails with the same small clanks that hundreds of other drops have had today, and then the sea lifts, in a hard sequence that is not dramatic from above, and is everything below. Inside U-504, the last note is different. It is shorter, broken, as if the hull has tried to sing and lost the air to do it. The deck shivers, and then becomes level in a way that is wrong. Men look at one another and do not need language. The captain has one order left that matters. Batteries. Secure. Then he listens to the boat. The boat does not answer. Water comes where water did not live before. On the surface, the stain grows into a colour no one mistakes. Bubbles rise in ropes. A timber turns over and shows a fresh, bright wound. His Majesty's ship Wren and His Majesty's ship Kite hold station and wait for the last heavy breath of the sea to tell them the depth where metal has stopped being a shape. The aircraft circle once more, then twice, then widen. The time on the bridge log will read 1543, and the chart will carry the numbers 4533 north 1056 west. There is no tally for men saved, because there are none. The box opens again, not as a mercy, but because the work is done. Engines come up to cruising speed. The wireless speaks its spare sentence to shore. The sea resumes its indifferent chop, as if it had not been a room, a corridor, and then a coffin. The minute that once belonged to the U-boat has become a measurement that its enemies hold in their hands. The haze lifts in the west, and the sun angles down, and the men who have flown and sailed this square of the Bay of Biscay count the patterns that were dropped and the patterns that landed true. They do not talk about victory. They talk about timings. How long between the alarm and the first splash? How far a submarine falls in the first 10 seconds when main vents open clean? How the last 5 seconds can be taken away by a bomber that rolls in early and puts his stick on the line. A bow must travel. Numbers, not adjectives. Bearings, not metaphors. The day has taught the same lesson in several voices. 45 seconds can be a life if the attacker is far and late. 45 seconds is nothing when he is close and sure. Word spreads the way it always does in a fleet. A Sunderland crewman leans on a hangar rail that evening and tells a ground fitter that the tanker submarine did not vanish. It staggered under them, just long enough to be measured, and then was gone. A destroyer telegrapher writes the contact report that goes to a desk in Liverpool and does not add the sentence he is thinking, which is that the system works if everyone keeps his place. A pilot from number 502, Squadron Royal Air Force, writes up a quiet form that lists takeoff time, ordnance, expended fuel remaining, and 2 letters that mean he saw the oil turn black. There is no line for the human feeling that follows a day like this, so it is not written. Across the water, in bases that smell of salt and diesel and damp clothing, the other side receives a different kind of report. There are names on the board that will not report in. There are families that will not hear engines on a gate road again. The staff officers do not have space for grief, only for measures. They look at the training tables and see crash dive drills that hit the marks 30 meters in the 27 to 30 second band for good crews, 60 meters in about 1 minute. They look at the operations logs and see that those numbers are not saving boats that are found inside 1 mile by aircraft that do not warn with old radar. They do not need to be told what it means. They can read it in the list of boats overdue. German countermeasures have been in motion already, but days like this give those measures weight. Flak crews on tankers and on ordinary boats have been told to fight through the bay with guns up, but airspeed and radar timing turn courage into a poor trade. Running in groups promises many eyes and many barrels, but it also writes large wakes that radar loves and presents a bigger shape to orbiting aircraft. The radio detector that once squealed in time for a surface sprint now says nothing to centimetric sets. The snorkel is moving from trial to issue, promising batteries without the exposure of a full surface charge. But the sea demands that metal learn a new way to breathe, and crews learn a new way to hear. None of it changes the day that has just been lived. None of it gives a captain more than the seconds the world will spare. On the Allied side, the method sharpens because method is what can be sharpened. Patrol lines adjust to the places where returning submarines must cross. The habit forms of stacking aircraft so that one watches while one attacks and a third marks the datum so that no sighting goes to waste. Support groups rehearse the creeping approach until even the junior operators on the sets can feel the difference between a contact that is real and a ghost that lives in their own hopes. A destroyer captain who once might have rushed a bright trace now learns to ease the throttle and let the room close 1 yard at a time. Patience, not speed. Geometry, not chase. The lesson writes itself into human muscle as well as into orders. A bombardier learns the new sight picture for a boat that has just crossed 10 meters and is still falling fast. He stops aiming at a tower and starts aiming at a path. A sonar man relearns his ear so that he can hold a damaged hull that is trying to be a shadow. He does not chase volume, he chases the shape of quiet. An aircraft navigator teaches himself to draw the last minute of a run on a map as if it were an equation where distance and speed cancel and only the drop time matters. A destroyer bridge team trains its eyes to a kind of calm that does not grab at a hint but waits for a pattern. The larger rhythm of the campaign picks up the new beat. The mid-ocean gap that once let submarines stretch their lungs begins to close under very long-range air. Escort carriers throw fighters and bombers far beyond the reach a convoy once had. The knight that used to be a friend to a surfaced boat turns traitor because a flood of light can erupt from a wing at the very edge of a radar beam, and a stick can be laid into the white rectangle where a deck has just been. By day, haze that hid becomes a medium through which centimetric waves draw pictures. The space where a crew could count on their eyes and their stopwatch is smaller each month. What was once a minute is now a corridor. What was once a corridor is now a doorway. None of this is abstract to the people at the center of it. A pilot washes oil off his hands and does not talk much. A sailor in a sloop mess deck eats bread and jam and then sits with his tea cooling in his hand because the sound of the hull ringing is still in his bones, and it will be there for a while. A man from a U-boat crew who has found himself in a British wardroom as a prisoner looks at a mug on a table and decides to hold on to it because the handle is a good shape and there is no reason not to hold something real. By the time darkness climbs up from the horizon, the arithmetic has been accepted by everyone who needs to accept it. If an aircraft rolls in inside a mile, if the bearings are clean and the run is straight, if the destroyers draw a box that does not leave a seam, then the clock that once belonged to the submarine does not belong to it any longer. A perfect crash dive remains a worthy drill. It does not remain a shield. 45 seconds are still written on the cards that crews carry in their heads, but the world has learned to spend those seconds better than the men who need them most. In the logbooks there will be no sentence that says realization. There will be times and coordinates and short phrases that look like they were typed by a machine. In the lives of the men who read those pages later, the lesson will be as plain as the smell of hot insulation in a closed space, and as final as a flat sea, where oil turns the water, a colour that no one mistakes. The day in the Bay of Biscay has given an answer to a question that captains still try to ask. How long do we have after alarm? The answer is simple, and it is not kind. Not long enough when the enemy is already there. Night climbs in. The square of ocean where the work was done looks like any other. The difference lives in logbooks and in hands. Along the Atlantic edge, crews step down, sign for fuel, ordnance and time, and leave out the part that cannot be written. In the escort group, bridge teams coil leads, check rails, and read back the tracks that made a room in the sea, and then made the room smaller until no space was left for a hull to keep its shape. Method has been proved. Now it repeats. Headquarters turns the day into paper, and the paper into procedure. Patrol lines shift onto the lanes. Submarines must use in and out of the Bay of Biscay. Very long-range patrols erase the gaps that once let a surfaced boat feed its batteries without fear. Stacked aircraft become habit. One watches, one attacks, one marks the datum. Support groups rehearse the creeping approach against towed targets until a young operator can feel the difference between a true contact and the noise his own hope makes in his ears. Slow throttle is no longer a caution. It is the rule. Geometry becomes bridge language. Across the water, the other side writes its own changes. Orders push minimum surface time. Running in groups gives way to running alone when the bay turns from corridor to trap. The radio detector that once squealed at old sets is useless against centimetric waves, and the lesson lands in silence. The snorkel moves from test to issue batteries, fed under a low grey pipe instead of under a sky that can flare white without warning. New boats carry more flak, but airspeed and timing still eat seconds faster than men can shoot them back. Crash dive drills stay strict. Inside the cruise, the minute changes shape. It is no longer a shield. It is a hope. The bay grows quieter as the year turns. Not for lack of hunting, for lack of targets that will show themselves. Submarines wait in river mouths for weather and darkness. Escorts watch for the small wrong line on a wave that betrays a low mast. Aircraft write long rectangles over grey water and bring home clean film, if clean film is what the day gives. The point is not a single kill. The point is pressure that never lifts. The clock that once gave a boat a place to breathe now rarely starts. In messes and wardrooms, the story travels in small pieces. A navigator explains the sight picture that matters most in the last 10 seconds of a run. A sonarman tells how a damaged hull tries to become a shadow, and how a patient operator can hold that shadow without grabbing at it. A destroyer captain draws 2 pencil lines to show how a box becomes a corridor, and a corridor becomes a door. The words are simple. The lesson is hard. This is a system. Each part must hold. No sentence in any official summary says the war turned on a particular day in the Bay of Biscay. That would not be true. What is true is quieter and more certain. Forcing a submarine under before it earns depth and holding it there until steel and men are out of measures becomes ordinary. The minute between alarm and safety is no longer counted by the boat alone. It is apportioned by aircraft and ships that have learned to spend it better. The numbers on the dials are the same. The world around those numbers is not. Months later, a patrol will note a small grey pipe where a tower used to be, and the first sighting of a snorkel by day will be recorded without drama. The counters keep coming. Escorts keep drawing boxes. Air crews keep flying legs that cut minutes into pieces that can be used. Crews on both sides keep their rituals for luck because the sea is old and men do not change. The arithmetic written here still holds. When the logs close and the pencils go away, the square of water where U-461, U-462 and U-504 ended is dark and without memory. Wind does what it has always done. Swell moves in slow ranks. A gull crosses the wake of a ship that does not know it carries a story. The men who were there remember the hull ringing and a needle easing through a number that meant they were still alive. The rest is numbers on paper and the method those numbers taught. 45 seconds can still be measured on a stopwatch. They will never again be enough when the enemy is already there.